There are a couple of things that are impacting the energy world very severely at this moment. The basic issue is that Strait of Hormuz remains closed practically. Although a few vessels have passed through the straits after the Iranians permitted it to pass through. Initially, there were reports that an Indian vessel has passed as well, was allowed or permitted to pass. But lately, there have been some prompts that it did not pass through Straits of Hormuz. So that situation remains unclear as yet. So that means the supply of 17 to 20% of oil from passing through the Strait of Hormuz remains closed at this very moment. And that is not the only issue. Further, just today, there has been a report by Reuters that Saudi Arabia has opted to reduce its output by 2 million barrels a day, or something like 20%. Iraq is already closed. UAE is almost closed. Qatar has announced closing it down. Kuwait is closed. So the output level from the Middle East, which controls roughly about 30 to 35% of the global markets, stands closed. And that means it would definitely impact Asia, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh severely, Indonesia. Because straits of vessels passing through the straits basically carry to either Asian continent or some to Europe as well. So that is coming to a standstill, and that is causing a major dismay in the oil markets. Now, you asked about the release of 400 million barrels of crude oil from the strategic petroleum reserves of the OECD countries, which the International Energy Agency announced. Out of this 400 million barrels, something like 172 million barrels US has promised to release from its own strategic reserves. Now, did it impact the markets or not? It seems not. Because initially, I think on Tuesday or last Tuesday or Wednesday, when Mr. Trump hinted that the war is about to end, prices dropped to $81, something around $80 a barrel, from what was about 110, 115 at that very moment. It slumped to something around 80. But since then, since the war did not stop, and there are no signs of it, so despite the announcement of the release of reserves from these strategic reserves of the OECD countries, prices have went back. Now, this has also happened despite the fact that Thursday evening, US announced basically loosening some sanctions on Russian oil, which were already at sea. So that meant that countries like India were allowed to buy Russian oil, and this is to remain in effect until April 11. So until April 11, US permitted Russian oil on the vessels and on seas to go to the respective buyers. But despite these two major announcements, markets have not gone down, and that means that market perhaps would need a cue that the war is getting to an end. At this moment, that cue is completely missing, especially after the brief message from Mujtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader of Iran. So until and unless something to that extent happens, one doesn't feel that markets are going to go below 100. There are indications that it may go even beyond 100. Iranians are saying that it could go even 200. So let's wait and see. But until unless this issue gets resolved politically, there's more of a geopolitical issue, some immediate means to resolve this crisis is not helping, and ultimately this issue has to be resolved before prices begin to go down. There's quite a lot geopolitics involved into all these things. Russian oil to India, many felt that this was a gift to India from President Trump in return of the announcement. And this announcement, interestingly, was made by Mr. Trump, not by the Indian side, not by Mr. Mukesh Ambani of Reliance Industries, who is regarded as Asia's richest person. And Asia also includes most of these Gulf Arab countries. So Mukesh Ambani is much more wealthier than the oil sheikhs of the Gulf Middle East. So there was an announcement mid last week, if I'm not wrong, that Ambani Group is going to invest something like $300 billion in a refinery in Texas, which would process shale oil. Now, what made all of a sudden Mr. Trump and Mr. Mukesh Ambani get together? They were on the opposing side until recently. The only answer to this is that it is geopolitics, that India was permitted to buy oil from Russia, and in return, India agreed to invest that $300 billion. It's a huge investment for a refinery, and this refinery is a refinery that will be built in the US after 50 years, 5 decades. For 5 decades, because of environmental considerations, there were no investment in refining capacity in the US was made. So after that, this major refinery with $300 billion have been made. So it's a basically give and take sort of decision, it seems. Similarly, when Iran announces that in case anything happens to our energy infrastructure, we will put the energy infrastructure of the entire Gulf Arab states on fire. That is again, and after that, both things have stopped. Iranian energy infrastructure has not been reported being hit over the last couple of days. Similarly, Iran has not apparently hit any major energy structure in the Gulf Arab states. So there's a lot. The issue again is basically geopolitics, and ultimately both Straits of Hormuz remains practically closed, despite all the announcement and pronouncements by Mr. Trump and the American and the US administration. So this has to be resolved politically. Iran, US, and indeed Israel, which is a major player behind all this new developments in that region. So until and unless they sit down and resolve it, or at least bring it towards a halt, that is to be seen when and how it happens, and will it happen. If it continues for some more time, for a few more weeks, the world is in for, this is a real bad news for the world. We are in with a major catastrophe economically. There would be price rises all around. There would be shortages in the market. There would be shutdowns. There are already talks of let's get back, and it's not only in Pakistan, throughout the world, that let's get back to the COVID sort of scenario when people were working from home, everything was closed in that sense. So anything could happen. The world is in a bad state, and there has to be a political resolution to that. Let's wait and see when that happens.